still so sane that it hurts. And is this a nightmare? Is it a dream? Because everything is moving so slowly. But then it's back to, come on, hurry up, one more step, one more day, just move it. It feels like I'm on a game show and all of my answers are wrong, but please just let me try again. I promise I'll get it right this time. It sounds like you're getting yourself into something. No, I'm trying to get myself out because it feels like giving up. Just giving up because I said I was better. I promised myself that I would be better, I would do better, and I can't be worse again. It feels like I'm trying so hard to hold on and to let go. It feels like I'm playing a game and I don't know any of the rules and I want to scream, but everyone else seems to know what they're doing, so why don't you? It feels like I finally found my words in the middle of a crowded room and I am screaming into the silent noise and no one will listen, but everyone hears. It feels like I am ruining everything and I'm sorry. Why do you always use the same words when you have plenty of your own but none of the right ones? It feels like I'm a disappointment to everyone. A disappointment to everyone. Just say it, because it's true, because that's what you are, but it's not what I want to be. I just want to be loved because I can't be by myself anymore. It feels like I've said too much and not enough at the same time, because it feels like everything and nothing, and I don't have any of the right words to describe all of the wrong feelings that it feels like. This was a poem that I wrote in 2019. It's called Feels Like, and I remember I wrote it when I was standing outside in my neighbor's garden having a panic attack. And I had absolutely no clue what was happening to me. And I remember the reason I was standing outside was because I didn't want anyone to see me and ask me what was wrong, because I didn't know how I would answer them, honestly. When I was younger, I sort of knew about mental health, but in the abstract, sort of like a big grey cloud that hovers over unfortunate people's heads and makes them sad. I didn't really know that it was something that could affect anyone, everyone, let alone someone like me, someone who went to a nice school, who had a nice family, nice friends, and didn't really have anything to worry about, I would say. But I did worry, and this is what this poem comes from. Like I said, my name is Jess. I'm 15 years old, currently in grade 11 at Herronbridge College. I am a poet, author, lover of fan fiction, singer-songwriter, musical theatre person, and I really want to go and study English and creative writing once I'm out of school. It's coming soon. For you guys, it's coming soon. You can do this. I am also somebody who's seen the effects of mental health and mental illness, both in my own life and in the lives of people that I care about. And I believe it's really important to start opening conversations around mental health and around the ways in which mental illness can impact people. How many of you guys feel alone, overworked, like you're constantly at war with your own brain, constantly trying to be something that everyone else says you should be, but you know deep inside you can never really get to? I know, I've been there. I've always been a bookish person. When I was younger, I tended to spend more time with books than I did with other people, specifically ones my age. I loved and still love reading and writing, getting to explore new worlds with a host of characters that replaced the friends that I didn't always have. When I was younger, I was praised for being studious and quiet and mature for my age. But in reality, I was terrified of failure, misunderstood by my peers, and convinced that if I happened to get a bad mark, it meant that I had failed in a personal capacity. This is quite a lot for a preteen mind to take in. Mental illness is defined as a condition which causes serious disorder in a person's behavior or thinking. It can manifest itself in loads of different ways. It affects everybody differently, and I do mean everyone. It's estimated that both globally and here in South Africa, 20% of teenagers suffer from some sort of mental health disorder, but the majority of these disorders go both undetected and untreated. Some of the most commonly known mental health disorders that you guys have probably heard of before are things like those relating to body image, such as body and facial dysmorphia and eating disorders, which have an average onset age of 15 years, depression, and obsessive compulsive disorder, or OCD, which, along with a number of other disorders, falls into an umbrella category called anxiety disorders. So, what do these mental health issues look like? Us, really. Mental health doesn't have a look. In fact, assuming that it does is one of the issues which people who have mental health issues have to face. The issue of stereotyping and the dismissal of somebody's experience if it doesn't fit within a very specific mold, usually dictated by society. If your experience with, say, depression doesn't fit with what society says depression looks like, then it's really easy for it to be invalidated. Some examples of these ultra-specific molds or stereotypes is the idea that somebody who has an eating disorder has to be stick-thin. Somebody who's depressed has to stare out of windows and spouts out poetry all the time. Or the idea of somebody who suffers from OCD being a hand-washing obsessed germaphobe. The truth is, mental illness is very egalitarian. That means it can affect anyone and everyone. It doesn't discriminate. It can affect anyone from world-famous comedians such as Robin Williams, who suffered a years-long battle with depression and substance abuse, ultimately culminating in the tragic taking of his own life, to people living from paycheck to paycheck on the poverty line, to, well, northern suburbs private school kids. The effects themselves can differ too from person to person. For example, my personal experience with depression has been akin to trying to eat your favorite meal when you lost your sense of taste. You take your first bite and you're a bit confused. You know, you've eaten this dish loads of times before. What's different now? Why can't you taste it? So you take another bite, and on top of being disappointed that you can't enjoy your favorite meal and confused about why, you're also a little worried. I mean, have you gotten sick, or like permanently disabled your taste buds, or done something that means you'll never be able to enjoy food again? And then you take more bites, and you're disappointed, and you're confused, and you're worried, and you're also just generally upset with your body. Like, seriously, this isn't hard, just work. This is what it can feel like to go through life filled with happy experiences, and not feel like you're able to experience any of the happiness in them. However, I do know that my experience of depression can be extremely different from somebody else's, and it's important to recognize this versatility. Some people are affected by mental illness more than others, but I'm pretty sure that the majority of us have seen its effects somewhere, be it in the lives of ourselves or the people around us. One form of anxiety specifically that I've seen a lot, both in my own life and in the lives of my peers, is that relating to academics. Ooh, logically, I'm sure we know that getting 170% or, heavens forbid, 60 on a test isn't going to spell the end of our academic careers or futures as a whole, but anxiety is very rarely born out of logic. It's defined as an intense, excessive, and persistent worry and fear about everyday situations. It can arise anywhere, at any time, for seemingly any or no reason. Maybe you walk into a party and feel your heart nearly beating out of your chest at the thought of having to talk to other people. Maybe, walking up to do a speech in front of your class, you wish that you could dissolve into the floor and oblivion. You wouldn't be alone in this. It's been shown by surveys that public speaking is in fact feared more than death. Or, maybe the night before a maths test, you lie awake, contemplating the horrors that are coming before you, and you know that you aren't going to get a wink of sleep that night. Academic situations, tests, and marks, both good and bad, play a huge role in our mental health. And I believe that this is because academics preys on three key fears that we have. First, the fear of being a disappointment. Second, the fear of what's unknown and therefore out of our control. And third, the fear of falling behind or below a certain standard. Now, I do want to say that, of course, these fears don't only exist in academic situations. However, they are easily seen, quite noticeable here. And sadly, I'm sure that in this context, many of us will be able to relate to them. So let's break this down, shall we? First off, fear of disappointing others. I'm sure you guys know, like when the teacher's handing back a test and she gives it to you upside down and then she just walks past, puts it on the table, then it's, hoo-hoo! That's the vibes. You get this sort of sinking feeling in your chest, similar to the one associated with losing a big match or getting a silver medal when you were so sure that you deserved to get gold. Feeling that you've let down your team, your teachers, coaches, parents, friends, and the world at large. This occurs when a sense of self-worth is tied to performance, academic, sporting, cultural, or otherwise. In other words, we get internal stability or happiness from some form of external validation. Now, I do want to say that, of course, there's nothing wrong with celebrating your achievements and enjoying getting praise from others. But the danger comes in when either consciously or subconsciously, we've sort of trained ourselves to think that we need to achieve or we failed in personal capacity. In other words, that getting bad marks would mean that we're a bad person. And so we put constant pressure on ourselves to achieve and prove that we are, in fact, good. The Oxford English Dictionary defines self-worth, or self-esteem, as confidence in one's own worth or abilities, also known as self-respect. Now, I want to focus on the first part, confidence in one's own worth or abilities. Okay, guys, so this is the part where we're going to have a bit of interaction. Yay. I want you guys to take just like 30 seconds and think about what you consider to be some of your best traits. Maybe you're empathetic, good listener, good friend, generous, maybe you have a really nice nose, whatever they are, just think about it for a bit, okay? Cool. Judging by the stony silence, I am going to assume that you've all thought very hard about it. Now, I'll go first. I think I'm a good listener. I may not respond to text messages always or ever, if you ask my friends, but I try and pick up the phone when they call me. And I can make a pretty good beef stew. Does anyone want to give some traits that they've thought of?
I think I'm also quite a listener and sometimes
That's really cool. That's awesome. Thanks. Anybody else?
I think I'm empathetic.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you.
I'd like to think that I'm pretty open-minded to new changes and stuff.
Those are all awesome traits, and thank you guys for participating. Now, it really does make my life so much easier. Thank you guys. Now, I just want all of you, regardless of whether or not you've said something, to think. How many of the traits that you consider to be some of the best things about yourself are things that you give to other people rather than things that you are? I know that 3 of the traits I listed in the beginning, being empathetic, being a good listener, being generous, are things that people can offer in a relationship rather than things that they just are. And of course, there's nothing wrong with being generous, or being a good listener, being a kind, good friend. These are all amazing things, and it's good to be a giving person. However, I can see that there's definitely a bit of a tie-in between self-worth and actions. We find value in what we do sometimes rather than who we are, and so it creates pressure to keep doing these things. And so in the face of all of this doing, what can we do? The first thing is to recognize that achievements don't make you a better person. This is something that is hard to do, especially if you're a high achiever of some sort. And also to know that vice versa. It works the other way around too. Not achieving doesn't make you worse. This is often hard to do. It's a lot easier said than done because this need to achieve can oftentimes come from underlying insecurities that we won't be accepted for ourselves by others unless we prove that we're deserving of their love and acceptance by doing or achieving or just being more. But the truth is, every minute, 5,000 milliliters of circulating through your body, being pumped by a muscle which itself beats 60 to 100 times per minute, spurred on by a complex neurochemical reaction, traveling down from your brain to your heart through a complex system of nerves, muscles, and fibers. You're doing enough. Just by being alive, you're doing enough. Now let's move on to that second issue, the fear of what is unknown and therefore out of our control. Okay, first off, where are my Disney kids at? I need to see you guys. Ah, yes. We'd love to see you. Now, you guys probably won't be surprised to know that when I was younger, my favorite Disney princess was always Belle. I saw her, and my little book nerd 9-year-old self was like, yes, I want to be you and also be your best friend. Thank you very much. So there's a concept which comes into play in screenwriting, where the screenwriters are busy developing a character, and they're looking at what motivates them throughout the story. It's a concept called want versus the need. So a character's want is sort of their superficial motivation. It's like a little thing that they want throughout the story. Whereas their need is their greater, more underlying motivation. It's what gets them through the entire story. So in Beauty and the Beast, Belle's want is, and I quote, adventure in the great white summer, whereas her need is to escape the closed-minded atmosphere of her small town and live her own life as her own person, free from judgment. She doesn't fear the future. In fact, she embraces it. She yearns to go off into the unknown. You guys see what I did there? The townsfolk, by contrast, have a little bit of a different view, which is shown in a line from the very creatively titled Mob Song, where they're heading off to lynch the beast and his talking IKEA. They say, we don't like what we don't understand. In fact, it scares us, and this monster is mysterious at least. I sincerely hope that no one here has ever mobbed a furry royal, but I'm pretty sure that the majority of us can relate to the sentiment that's being expressed in the song. The fear of what is beyond our scope of control and understanding. In other words, the fear of the unknown. Our brains are evolved to try and keep us safe. They've given us loads of ancestral instincts to protect us in a predator-dominated landscape, and have therefore learned to associate a static situation with a safe one. If you can control a situation, you can predict what's going to happen, and protect yourself from any dangers. I saw a post on a website called Tumblr which described anxiety as having far too much unused runaway from tiger's juice. We have a relatively little need for this in modern life. However, survival instincts have a habit of sticking around. Our brains are still trying to protect us, and so in situations that we can't control, we have a tendency to freak out. For example, walking into an exam. I mean, you can't control when you take the test, where you take it, where you sit, how the questions are asked, how the questions are marked, when you're going to get the test back, and so your brain is like, tigers, yes! So, what can we do in these situations to try and minimize some stress? Get rid of a couple of the tigers running around in our brains. I think it's most important to try and find some sort of balance between what we can control and what we can't or shouldn't try to. It sounds cliche, but honestly, study timetables and plans can be an invaluable source of help in terms of managing and structuring your time, giving you time to ask for help with things that you don't understand, and just generally getting you out of the stress of a situation where you feel like you're in the dark. Another thing which may be helpful is avoiding stressful situations such as the dreaded pre-exam talk. You know, when you walk into the quad and you see your friends standing around, notes in one hand, coffee in another, as they desperately try and cram the last of the info into their brains. Yeah. Oftentimes that's, shall we say, not the most conducive environment for feeling not stressed. And it's sometimes good to just take a moment, prepare yourself for the test, and try and not get swept into the tide of anxiety that's surrounding you. You guys have heard all of this before. You know it's so much easier said than done. It can often be frustrating when people assume that anxiety can be gotten rid of with a simple step-by-step plan, because the truth is, it can't. One of the things that's uniquely horrible about feeling anxious is as these thoughts and feelings are rushing through your mind, you know how illogical they are. It doesn't mean you can get rid of them. I suffer from OCD, or obsessive compulsive disorder. Now, when the term OCD is spoken, the image that usually comes to mind is of a hand-washing obsessed germaphobe, like I said earlier. This is not something which I personally have suffered from. However, it is a common example of a compulsive behavior. What is sometimes forgotten is that these compulsions or actions that people do stem from unwanted or intrusive thoughts known as obsessions, which can honestly be terrifying. In an attempt to get rid of this sort of terror, our brains try and control the situations via compulsions. Some examples of obsession to compulsion links are thinking that your car will be stolen unless you triple check the locks, thinking that you'll fail a test unless you sit in a specific spot and use a specific pencil to write it. Or yes, thinking that your entire family will die of a horrible disease unless you keep the environment sterile by washing your hands as often as you can and in a very specific way. Myself and other people suffering from this disorder know that compulsions are neither healthy nor logical. That doesn't mean we can just get rid of them. So, what can we do? If not to get rid of these thoughts, try and manage them. Like I said earlier, I believe that finding balance is key. A woman called Nora Roberts proposed a really interesting theory. She said that in life, all of us are juggling a bunch of balls, which represent obligations. You know, like family relationships, extramurals, marks. And as life goes on and more obligations get given to us, more and more balls are given to us too. And so we're trying to keep a whole bunch of balls in the air at the same time. But it's unrealistic to expect that we'll be able to keep them up all the time. It's just not healthy, not possible, frankly. The thing is though, some of these balls are made out of plastic, and others are made out of glass. Some of them can afford to let drop for a while and pick up later. Others will shatter if they hit the ground. The key is determining which is which. I believe that mental health is a glass ball. You don't have to do it all, and definitely not all at once. Now, let's move on to the third fear. The fear of falling behind or below a certain standard. So in 2020, I listened to a lot of music because there was like nothing else to do. And so I was really grateful when Miss Swift proved yet again that she is, in fact, the music industry with the release of her album Folklore. Yes, I am a Swiftie. Fight me on this. It is the hill I will die on. So there was one of the tracks on Folklore that really spoke to me, and not just because it's beautiful, has incredible orchestrals, it's incredibly written, but I love the track, This Is Me Trying, because it just perfectly captures the exhaustion, frustration, and sometimes desperation associated with feeling like you're falling hopelessly behind and can never hope to get back to where you were. This is shown in some of the lyrics, like, I've been having a hard time adjusting. I had the shiniest wheels, now they're rusting. They told me all of my cages were mental, so I got wasted like all my potential. And my personal favorite, I was so ahead of the curve that the curve became a sphere. Fell behind all my classmates and I ended up here. The reason that this is a separate point from our discussion on feeling like a disappointment is because I think that the focuses are in different directions, shall we say. When we feel like we're a disappointment, we believe that we in and of ourselves are unworthy in some way. So it's sort of internally focused. Whereas feeling like you're falling behind is more externally focused. You feel like you're not meeting a certain standard. You still feel like you're not good enough, but because of external standards set by other people, society as a whole, or ourselves. It is a vicious cycle. You know, there are standards, and you don't meet them, and then you feel like you're not achieving, and then you feel like you're disappointing everybody, and it goes on. And it's easy to work ourselves into the ground in search of some unattainable goal, the green light at the end of Daisy's Dock for any of you Gatsby fans out there. This isn't just in academic situations, though. It's anywhere. For example, the beauty standards rated across social media, which people work sometimes literally to the bone to try and achieve. This fear of not meeting expectations can rise anywhere where there are expectations of any sort. And I do want to say, although there are loads of negatives to social media, are loads of positives to it, and I do truly believe it can be a force for good. But it is also important to recognize that society can use it to sort of share these stereotypes which are so harmful and that we can really hope to read. Now, let's talk about something which I personally have a bit of a love-hate relationship with: productivity. On the one hand, I understand that it's good to try and manage your time, get stuff done in a timely fashion. But on the other hand, it is super easy to get into a awful rhythm of trying to fill as much time as possible, and when you don't have things to be stressed about, you're stressed because you don't have things to be stressed about. In the words of Bo Burnham, apathy is a tragedy and boredom is a crime. A lot of my personal need for productivity comes from what I like to call these evil shoulds. You know, when you spend time thinking not about what you are doing, but about what you should be doing, which not only ruins the present moment, but also doesn't even accomplish the thing that you want to do. It's just a lose-lose situation. However, what I think is really interesting is just to take a step back and at any given time, think about some stuff that your brain is telling you you should be doing. I mean, right now I'm talking to you guys, and there's this voice in the back of my mind that's saying, you need to finish your public speaking speech. There's an English comprehension due on Monday, and if you left the stove on, I swear. Man. The thing to do, though, is to acknowledge these thoughts. Understand that you don't have to do it all. Definitely not all at once. To use an analogy that I'm rather fond of, taking the lid off of a pot of boiling water may not cool it down, but it definitely will stop an explosion. Sometimes, as hard as it may seem, especially in a world in which it feels like we as school kids are having stuff piled on us at every conceivable opportunity, it's important to just take some time off. Don't fill all the space that you have. Leave some space for you, really. Overall, I believe that these three fears we talked about are components of one bigger one: fear of not belonging. We worry that we won't be accepted in and of ourselves by others unless we prove that we're deserving of their love and acceptance. So we work, we plan, we judge our appearances and our performances on the sports field, on the stage, on social media, in the classroom. And we work ourselves into the ground, trying to prove that we are, in fact, adequate. We require others to give us a sense of confidence in our own worth or abilities. Oftentimes, this huge pressure, and make no mistake, it is huge pressure, can go unacknowledged. Because if a person was to show how much it was weighing on them, they would be branded as weak, you know? They would be told to cheer up, or just snap out of it. Or my personal favorite, just try harder. When really, you're fighting against neurochemistry. It should be the plot of a superhero movie, not an average Wednesday. I saw another post on that website I talked about earlier, Tumblr, which again described anxiety as like that moment when your chair almost tips or you miss a step when going down the stairs, except it never stops. In my own experience, I've found it to feel a little bit like if you were to accidentally swallow a glob of mint toothpaste while brushing your teeth. Your throat feels sticky and closed up. It's hard to breathe. You feel slightly sick and slightly stupid. Not again. How could I mess this up? Really? Why am I like this, honestly? Anxiety goes hand in hand with depression, body image disorders, and OCD. And society itself is more than happy to encourage this relationship with this huge pressure they put in us to be perfect. You know, telling us, you can be yourself in exactly the way that we dictate. And really, the only thing that can and should be standardized about us is the way that we love, support, and understand both one another and people around us. I want to bring up that statistic that I said earlier. The fact that it's estimated that 20% of teenagers, both in South Africa and globally, suffer from some sort of mental health disorder, but the majority of these disorders go both undetected and untreated. In an average grade of, say, 100, this means that almost an entire class of people are constantly at war with their own minds, constantly trying to deal with the barrage of things being thrown at them by the outside world whilst managing the storm going. Thank you, guys. a bit of a blur right now, but yeah. So I think let's do that. Let's open some conversations. I'm challenging you guys to ask some questions, to share anything that you feel comfortable sharing. I'd love to hear from you guys. You know, if you have any questions or stories or anything that you'd like to share. And yeah, let's chat. Let's do this.